Welcome to Aware. We are dedicated to communicating information that inspires your positive growth and change. Are you interested in a peaceful planet? Are you interested in optimal health? Are you living with purpose? Are you enjoying your life? We realize each person can make a difference, and our mission is to empower your awareness. The choices that you make in every moment shape your life, and we encourage you to realize that you have your own answers and to always listen to your own truth. We invite you to stay aware.
Hello, I am Lisa Garr, and welcome to the Aware Show Health and Mindset series, where I speak with experts about what life looks like in our new normal, and how do we not only embrace change, but adapt to it on a moment-to-moment basis, and at the same time, maintain a healthy mindset. It's a lot, and that's why we have this show, so that we can learn from experts solution-oriented techniques that help us connect more with ourselves and with each other. And when we're learning these techniques in a like-minded community like this one, it makes it a little bit easier. So let's just make a commitment to spending this time choosing where we put our thoughts right now. And together we can create new possibilities in this space. Now, we are in a specific time of uncertainty, of unprecedented change. But this can also be a time of massive opportunity. We have a choice in our lives to either be in a state of victimization, or we can take our circumstances and we can go into some sort of action. I will tell you, action feels so much better than victimization. And it doesn't appear that we can do anything about our global pandemic, but we really can impact the outcome in various ways. Listen, we're all in our own stories. We're all in our own version of this. And it is affecting people in different ways, different ranges. But we have the opportunity right now to speak with a specialist, a change specialist, and a psychotherapist, Dr. Toni Galardi. And she has been doing this for decades. She's helped thousands and thousands of people through her unique process called the Life-quake process. And this process has helped rebuild secure inner foundations for people and help us all adapt to change, even in a time of crisis. Welcome to the show, Toni. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I love
this show. I'm excited about this topic because I've interviewed you several times about the Life-quake process. And tell me a little bit about your story, about how you came across this process, how it led you to writing about life-quakes.
So I used to call myself the poster child for the change impaired because I was one of those people who definitely resisted change and wanted a secure life. And it took 3 near fatal experiences every 7 years for me to realize that when I looked at what preceded each of those massive crises in my life, that there were signs that I was being given that I wasn't paying attention to. And the first one happened in my workplace when I was in my early 20s. And the second one happened out of a marriage that I needed to leave. And the third one happened in my home with mold. So each time there were messages. When I was working on skid rows in my young years, as my 20s, I got a feeling that we needed to get a security guard. I asked my boss, please, let's get a security guard. And he said, oh, no, we don't need a security guard. And 1 week later, an addict got through screening, and I didn't know he was high. And I tried to escort him out of the building, and he grabbed me by the neck, threw me against the wall, and tried to strangle me to death. So that was the first, experience of having to be thrown out of something, having to have my first neck injury, and then 7 years later, it was because I had made this vow to stay in this marriage, and even though I was moving on to another path, a conscious path, and it was changing me in profound ways. And I was in 3 car accidents in a 6-day period. So that was the second time.
You really created these cycles for yourself. Why do you feel we create such change in cycles like this?
I think in my case, like I'm sure most of the thought influencers you've worked and spoken to and interviewed, many people have whatever is their wound is the path in which they're meant to heal themselves and help others. And so I think I took on this journey of being, because you can look as a therapist like, oh, you've got it all together. And so by sharing that I can just be just as dumb as you are, people feel they can relate, Now I don't do that anymore. When I got the hit that I was meant to leave Los Angeles, I left. I moved to Marin County, when I was given dreams and told, leave California. Even though I went kicking and screaming, I love California and I didn't want to leave. But the messages from the dream time kept getting stronger and stronger to leave. And I actually left 3 weeks before the fires in Northern and Southern California happened simultaneously. Wow. And I was given information in the dream time that, that these were manufactured. So anyway.
So much information that comes through to you. But back to the question about the cycles, why did you feel that you created the cycles?
I think that I'm an astrologer and a numerologist. So life does tend to move in cycles. If we don't make changes within a 7-year cycle, there's the end, we completely regenerate the body over a period of 7 years. So it's really important to be looking at your life at the end of 7 years, or before the end of 7 years, to be looking at what needs to be shifted and restructured. And we're seeing this both personally and globally. And I saw that when the model was downloaded to me 30 years ago, I saw the interface between personal resistance to change and how we choose to negotiate change on the global level. That we wait until our hair's on fire personally, and we wait until we almost don't have a world to live in with our climate before we, create something such as this COVID-19 to reduce our carbon footprint. I mean, that's my personal philosophy. But
it's hard to say that we created this. It is definitely making an impact on us globally in terms of recorrecting and rebalancing things. And when we've had past crises, which we've seen historically, opportunity always seems to come out of it in some way. It's not always 100,000% viewable to everyone. But so in this case, how do you see an opportunity coming out of a global pandemic?
Oh, I think there's huge opportunity. We've seen data of what's happening to the ocean. Animals that are coming back to the Florida shores. To nest that hadn't for many, many, many years. The dolphins coming back to Italy. We're seeing massive change. Los Angeles, I'm sure the chemtrails, I've been hearing that, the sky is clear for the first time in years, there is a brilliant TED Talk from a woman who is from World Health Organization that came out a few weeks, about the end of February, in which she said, this is Mother Nature. We went into places in the world, in the Amazon and whatnot, and stripped those areas and unleashed certain things like microorganisms and whatnot. And she called out to me 30 years ago, and I was sitting on a beach with my friend Susie Pruden, and literally I heard her speaking to me in Maui and saying, I am your mother. You will not, if something isn't done, and she asked me, it was my clarion call to do something. So this,
like the planet Earth.
Yeah. It was the most profound experience of feeling like, oh my God, she really is our mother. I mean, I had the experience of it, of her, not just like a concept, but that we really did evolve, from her. And she was really feels like we are her children. And she said, I will go on. She said, I'm going to go on. I've always gone on through every, evolutionary cycle. She said, it's you that I don't want to see perish. And so when I wrote this, originally this model came to me, the Life-quake repurposing method is about taking these things that happen in our lives on the personal level. It's, let's take something as simple as your marriage ending or a health crisis. That happened to me as well, a massive health crisis that really shifted my life when I got Epstein-Barr at 30, and I started learning about functional medicine and shamanism as a way of looking at the energy body and what needs to be healed in the trauma that lives in the energy body. So all of that came in my own life out of my own crises, but what I'm passionate about is helping people prepare for change before they have to hit the wall,
That would be helpful. But we don't always know that crises are going to happen. We live, as you said, you did, thinking that we're invincible or it won't ever happen to us. Or that that's the first thing I always hear on the news when you see someone who's being interviewed about a crisis and they say it happened in my own neighborhood, because we usually don't think that it's going to. And in this case, it's happening in our entire neighborhood. And it is got to be looked at as a different opportunity for change. Yes, it's an opportunity for our world to change. And we get to really see what it looks like to stop treading on the mantle of Mother Earth and stop with the footprint. And we really get a chance to see that right now. But let's talk about us personally. How can we take this opportunity if we're out of work and we don't know if our jobs are going to return and we're having a hard time making ends meet and we're saddling ourselves with debt? How do we turn that into an opportunity, Toni?
I think one of the things that's going to come out of this is a lot of data about how to support your immune system. And I do a newsletter that I send out every week. And I give tips in that newsletter that are astrologically oriented because it's part of my platform for helping people manage change. So one of the things that I'll take besides the astrology tips, I'll take some person who I think of as having been a brave leader who spoke out, at a time, when there was a lot at stake. And so one of the stories is about a man by the name of Andre Beauchamp, who came up against Pasteur. Pasteur kept saying, it's the organism. Beauchamp was saying, no, it's the host. If the host is healthy, and because Pasteur had wealthy connections, he banished Beauchamp's work. And it wasn't until many, many, many years later, at the end of his life, Pasteur said, you were right.
Yes.
So what we know is that, and Nostradamus talked about this, with rose hips. He was, his patients that he gave rose hips to, which had vitamin C in it and taught them hygiene, they survived the dark ages, with the plague, the Black Plague. So we know that if people start to really pay attention to their diet, B, hygiene. We've certainly really gotten, I think, that really a big message on hygiene.
Strong message. Yes.
And the big piece that I think I come in as, as a therapist and as a life repurposing coach is having to do with managing fear, because fear is the biggest factor, honestly, in what happens with our immune system. So because this is a time of uncertainty, because we're in a time of uncertainty, how do you work with your emotions in your body so that you don't spin out with the fact that the economy, what's happening with the economy, what may be happening in your own home,
The statistics are, yes, they can be daunting. So this is what the Life-quake process is all about. And you mentioned, of course, health and hygiene, but managing your fear mindset is super important. And there are 7 steps that go to the Life-quake repurposing roadmap, basically, Can you share some of those steps with us so that we can learn what that
Sure.
looks like?
So one of the things that's happening as people are at home well, it's like 6 weeks now, I guess, is I'm as I look at social media, my first stage of my model is boredom. And boredom is a very subtle stage in managing change. Most people don't pay attention to it. They just do more. They'll just eat a little more. They'll be on social media a little more. They don't pay attention to something's needing to change in their life.
They'll
And
run from
so
it too, fill it up with
that's
different things rather than experiencing it. Yeah.
But it is in on the emotional tone scale, with ecstasy at the top and despair at the bottom. The transition emotion right in the middle is boredom. So if we start to do an inquiry and notice, where does my energy go up? Just paying attention. I have an exercise I call connecting the dots, of just paying attention to where now, not where you've been, what your history is, or what color you liked, and how you dressed, or what kind of exercise that you did, but now, in this moment. Now, what are you noticing is where your energy goes up, and and where does it not, and where does it go down? So boredom is that first stage of very subtle messages are showing you. That first job I had, I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to depend on my then fiance, then who became my husband, for financial support. I was proud, and I knew that I needed to leave that job. So there were signs, and there's often signs. When I work with a client, we go back before the crisis, before their story and their victim, and we start to see when, like, he was having an affair. Okay, let's go back 5 years. Were you happy in this marriage? As an example. Okay.
Interesting. So what if we went back prior to the pandemic and we looked at how fast were we moving in life? Yes.
That's right.
And that is we've been talking a lot about the pace that is completely different and how noticeably different it is. So that's such an interesting thing, that boredom is a transition emotion. Some people run from it. Some people manage it. I've always been afraid of boredom. That's all. Yes. I've noticed that about myself, is that I have a fear of boredom. So I would fill my life with different things to do. Not necessary. That was an old emotion, but tell us another one of the steps of the process.
The second stage, if you keep doing this unconsciously, because there's a conscious way to do this and an unconscious way. In the unconscious way of doing stage 2 is if you keep feeding the boredom, which often people have turned to the internet, social media. That's what there's been a lot of data on internet addiction for the last 5 years now, and people turning to the internet and to social media to quell their boredom, in their job or their relationship or whatever. And so if you keep doing that, depression starts to set in stage 2. If you do it consciously, it is about what I call conscious dying, that you are literally beginning to allow for a death process to take place of an old life. And the way you see that is you'll see what's no longer viable, just like the seasons of the year, what's no longer viable. And what people do unconsciously is they up and intensify their addictions in stage 2, if they're not really doing this in an awakened state. Okay. And then stage 2 leads to stage 3, which is the radical severance stage. And if one does it unconsciously, the radical severance stage, it comes in the form of some massive crisis that gets your attention, to get your attention. And if you do it consciously, that's when you consciously say goodbye to old parts of your life that are no longer viable. Stage 4 is what I call the cosmic barbecue. And that is the in-between time, when what you're being called to do is to be without identity. That period of time when, and I've got a client right now who's really feeling this very strongly. She owns airport parking lots. Okay. And you can imagine what's going on in that world.
Oh,
And
yes.
she knew. The interesting thing is, she came to me as a client before the blow up. Okay. Because she was feeling like she didn't want to do this anymore. And now she's terrified because, income has gone into nothing practically. 5 cars
Right.
in a parking that used to hold 120. So
Yes.
we were working on it. She said, I just feel like I was so accustomed to this identity. I had 50, 60 people working for me, and she had to lay them all off, except for a very skeleton crew. And she said, I feel like I don't know who I am. That's stage 4, that there's this huge opportunity in this stage to do this excavation of your shadow. What's in the cellar, what I call the cellar of your consciousness, that you've disowned, that you've denied, about yourself. And some of that is creative stuff, like juicy, creative parts of you that you felt like you couldn't address because you had to have this job with the golden handcuff syndrome. Okay. So there's an opportunity.
We have signs or something that happens beforehand. So that was the 4th stage. What is the 5th?
Yeah. So the 5th, toward the end of the 4th stage is when, through some tools that I give, where you begin to, if you do this work to open to a calling, because I'm not a career coach in the traditional way. For me, it's a very right brain, very mystical process that involves continually humbling oneself and surrendering to spirit and listening in meditation for messages to begin moving toward what you are called to do next. What is your calling? And my friend Martin Root and I were talking on the phone the other night. We were talking about this very thing, and I adore him. But anyway, because he was one of those people I interviewed for this book that didn't have to crash and burn. He just decided this isn't anymore. And he just changed it up, one of the few. But so at the end of stage 4, you really start to get the calling. And what stage 5 is the apprenticeship stage, where you're trial and erroring with the new project or the new thing that you're wanting to do in your life. And it's important to allow yourself to be like we were when we were kids, where it was okay to experiment. It was okay to just throw things up against the wall and see what works, and really deal with taking away that success and failure concept completely, even though you're 50 years old, and how am I starting over at this age, right? And the willingness, but the most brilliant inventors, Thomas Edison, 1,000 experiments, right? Walt Disney went bankrupt 3 times. He wasn't successful till his late 50s. So that willingness to try things and if they don't work, it's what I call a success. This comes from behavioral psychology, successive approximation to the goal. That's the key. So then stage 6, once you feel like you are in the work you're repurposing your life, what stage 6 is about is it's what I call it the abundance stage. It's the stage of being able to see, even if your life isn't abundant from the financial point of view, that you experience. I interviewed Shelley Campbell, who wrote The Wealthy Spirit and Zero to Zillionaire. And she talked in her book about how important it is to surround yourself with dolphins, rather than, what does she call them? The kind of fish that are really, that eat things.
Sharks.
So, thank you, sharks.
Yes.
I need to eat dinner. Anyway, so stage 6 is about how do you perceive? Yeah, I know, sharks. How do you perceive your reality from a purview of miracle making? And this I talked about actually in stage 6 when I lost everything due to mold. My home became infected with mold. And within 2 hours, I had to walk away from everything.
Wow.
In fact, I did an interview with you, the very first interview in 2002, shortly after all that happened. And I was literally having to start over from scratch, living in a motel. And I was committed that I was going to see myself as wealthy, even without anything. I had to buy new clothes. I lost everything.
That's incredible. We We just have a minute left. I wanted to get to stage 7 if we could.
Stage 7 is becoming an agent of change for the world. It's the altruism stage. And what this does for your immune system, like I have all the data about what altruism and just acting selflessly does to strengthen your immune system. So whenever you do for others, like in this day and time when people can feel sorry for themselves, and it's understandable, especially if you've been hit hard by this, epidemic, is to, when you do something for others, even if it's just calling people just to see how they're doing,
It helps so much. It does.
Absolutely.
It helps so much. And I've noticed that as well. Even with acts of compassion, the kindest, smallest acts of compassion, even in your thoughts, not reacting on Facebook, helping a neighbor, calling your parents, all of those good things. Well, this is definitely, you are an expert in Life-quakes. I have looked at your life and how many times you have been resilient with change. And it's wonderful that you've created a process to help people around this. Thank you so much, Dr. Toni Galardi. And thank you for helping us learn how to get through these Life-quakes. I am Lisa Garr, and until next time, I invite you to stay aware.